invite to the Transportation Committee special meeting, Friday, June 12th at 1 p.m. I'd like to start out by asking the interpreter to explain how to use the interpretation services.
Announcement from the interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting scrolls are. Click on the interpretation icon, the world, and select English as your language. If you are joining through the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, 3 dots, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you are in the meeting room, please check out your headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Aviso por parte del intérprete. Para hacer el uso de la interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. En el icono de interpretación, globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, 3 puntos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio, silenciar audio original. Servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de la reunión, favor de pedir los auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we call home. The tribal nations of the San Diego region have historically faced injustices. We acknowledge the harmony that peoples who have since endured displacement, persecution, and systemic oppression. We pay our respect to the unceded territory and homelands of the 18 tribal nations in our region, the most in any county in the United States. From 4 cultural groups, the Kumeyaay, the Genyo, the Losueño, the Capuengo, and the Cahuilla. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the San Diego community, we acknowledge this legacy. We aspire to learn from indigenous traditional knowledge and experiences in undoing the justices of the past. Please join me in the pledge. Francesca, can you confirm we have a quorum?
Thank you, Chair. We do have a quorum with the County of San Diego and the Port of San Diego present.
Great, thanks. We'll now move into the agenda. Just for informational purposes, I've asked for comment times to be 2 minutes per item, with the exception of consent. We'll limit it to 1 minute per item on consent. I appreciate people keeping the comments on topic if possible. The first agenda item is non-agenda public comments. Francesca, do we have any speakers?
Thank you, Chair. We do. If you're online and would like to speak on non-agenda items, please raise your hand now. We'll start with Purita Javier and then Cesar Javier.
From ceramics manufacturing in town located, constructed and even altered, converted, operated residential zone, dedicated community in the city of San Diego since 1984. Search, we study, explains the hazards of ceramics Mesa College, where the owner took his vocational training as ceramics and pottery artist must have been taught the threat to health and safety in our investigation with 2 artists, members of San Diego Pottery Guild, based in Spanish Village, Balboa Park, explain the same hazards to human. In October to December 2021, Occupational Citizen Review published still called the COVID-19 pandemic that ceramics artists can be exposed to many hazards.
Vice Chair here, Councilor Elo Rivera, descent American. We are Filipino American seeking for justice. And we are aggravatingly being hurt by the justice rendered upon us, handed upon us by Councilor Lacaba saying, Mr. Javier, you crossed the line. We will ask you, who is threatened? Us in our community. We have voiced these concerns and nobody responded positively for 5 years from our 11 elected officials. Mayor Gloria down to the city attorney. And now we are perceived as violent creatures. God help us. This is our community concern, Councilor Rivera. When we were trying to connect with you, if only to find a solution. We know, sir, Mario, that this is not your jurisdiction, but this is the jurisdiction of the members, thinkers, particularly the Capitol felt anything all about good leadership. This is the right thing to do now, and we are linking this, connecting this. This is a conflict of interest.
Thank you. Your time
This
has
is a
expired.
fraud.
Our next speaker.
I would suggest that you all pay attention because these meetings have been run illegally. I am not positive how long, but you guys have not been noticed outside. But I have asked SANDAG to cure and correct the chiefs and sheriffs meetings, the SANDAG Executive Committee and the Board of Directors. Those are only 3 meetings that I'm asking to cure and correct and revisit the meetings because you guys have never noticed the meetings properly. Now, if that doesn't happen, I suggest that you talk to your legal team and that you talk to the Board of Directors, the executive, like whoever you need to make sure that because of the blatant disregard for following procedure and the law. You have a legal team that is giving inaccurate information saying that because they're posting it down at the toll center, which is in the middle of nowhere, that is suffice, which it is not. It is actually against the law, meaning that everything that you guys have worked on could be deemed null and void if this 3 meetings are not cured and corrected in the next 3 weeks.
And a learning process for all of us. Is there a way to work out the legal questions with a statement on future agendas that say previous public meetings were posted in such and such a place, they are now posted in such and such a place? Would that help with legal issues as a question for what DRA is talking about now? With that said, I wanted to comment on, I'm sure you yourselves are all aware of the SDMTS board meeting yesterday and the idea of a price freeze for disabled persons for their monthly discount fares and bus passes and such. I think that is so incredibly decent. It was presented by Council President Olvera from San Diego. And I hope it is really considered. You have to really bring it down to just a $1 or $2 level if you are going to increase it. The price freeze idea is the best, and I hope you can really consider that, as I've been asking. Just be open to ideas and suggestions at this time. Work with our disabled community, and they need help. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the public comments.
Thank you. We will now move on to the consent calendar. Francesca, do we have any public comments on consent?
Thank you, Chair. We do. If you are online and would like to speak on any of the consent items, please raise your hand now. We'll start with Cesar Javier and then allegedly Audra.
We speak the truth. For the first time on the aspect of minutes, we were privileged to hear the presentation of Lemon Grove, of their impact project along this mission of Santiago. We heard it, we revered it, and we look forward soonest that City of Santiago will present theirs for us to learn and be able to work together and have it through. 3.2 is a consistent discussion, a discussion if only to solution to improve, and improve. Changes for good is welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be allegedly Audra, and allegedly Audra will be our final speaker on the consent.
All right, regarding the minutes, again, I'm being very serious here. I think you really need to take into consideration what I'm saying. If you guys cannot follow procedure with the meeting, you cannot be trusted with anything that you're doing, anything that you're passing. So again, I suggest that you encourage Sandag to revisit those 3 meetings so that you guys don't sit here and have wasted the entire time that you have been on this board, because I would say that everything that you have done, everything that Sandag has done from its inception potentially, since the Brown Act has been in place, has been illegally done. I don't want to have to take money from the people to go ahead and force you guys to capitulate to follow the law. It's absurd to be asking you this, but I encourage you to do the right thing, because if you don't, then it will show that the people cannot trust you or anything that you pass.
Thank you. That concludes the public comments.
Think any members have comments on consent? Seeing none, entertain a motion to approve consent.
Move approval by Sanchez, second by Edson.
Thank you for that. Go ahead, please vote. Opposed to the risk of running meetings on Friday afternoon, or maybe my head's not early there, and managed to skip the agency update, so I'm gonna give Mario a second to do an agency update.
Okay, thank you. On May 22nd, we received a request to attend the California Joint Legislative Audit Committee. Assembly member De Mayo had raised a request to the audit. Number 3, the North Coast Corridor Mitigation and Lagoon Restoration, and reporting on SB1 and the SHOP programs. Both myself and the Chief Financial Officer, Don Batiste, traveled to Sacramento. We testified to the Joint Committee. The Joint Committee is Senate and Assembly. We brought up that most, if not all, the Transnet 1 program has been delivered. The North Coast Corridor Mitigation, the Lagoon Restoration, which was being brought up, was done under NEPA and CEQA, led by Caltrans and covered under statute for the Public Works Plan for that corridor. And on the reporting side, we also commented that we do our quarterly report that's required by law on SB1, and that Sandag does not utilize SHOP funds. The SHOP funds are utilized only by Caltrans. The vote was to not proceed with an audit. There was all the different mechanisms that we have, or in SANDAC for checks and balances, the ITOC, the audit committee, our independent auditor, our FDA audits, federal highways reviews, CTC oversight, and Caltrans oversight. Since 2008, we have had between audits and reviews about close to 300, and we average about 4. Remember, the mile was that were regarding the state budget. The state legislator must pass a budget by Monday, the 15th, June the 15th. Something that has raised our concerns is the reduction on the cap and invest greenhouse gas emission funds. We have brought up together with our partners at North County Transit and MTS that concern about that funding being lost. I think that the summary of the conversation is that we will be having some tough funding conversations in the coming year. So that's something that's clearly highlighted. It forms SB 375 in the Sustainable Communities Strategies was approved by the Senate and now is moving to the Assembly for further conversations and discussion. Also, I want to mention that our offices are going to be closed on June 19th for the June 10th holiday. Thank you.
Thanks, Mario. And I also skipped, did any committee members want to make a nomination? This is the first of 2 readings for the ordinance amendments. The Transportation Committee will be asked to approve the proposed amendments on July 17th. I want to remind the members that by participating in the vote on July 17th, you will be confirming that all of those that are voting have reviewed the public comments in the outreach report. I also wanted to thank Councilmember Mendoza for being a public officer at the meeting on Tuesday for public outreach. That was greatly appreciated. And then just from a flow perspective, that we do also have a requirement that all ordinances be read in full at the time of the introduction, unless all members present. Hopefully we can get a unanimous motion so we don't have to waive the entire ordinance in its full at this particular meeting. The title of the ordinance will be San Diego Association of Governments Comprehensive Fare Ordinance and Ordinance Establishing a Regional Fare Pricing Schedule. With that, I will go ahead and turn the presentation over to SANDAG staff. And Tim, I guess you're at that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Transportation Committee. Good afternoon. My name is Tim Garrett, Associate Regional Planner at SANDAG. I'm joined here with Mark Olson, Director of Marketing and Communications with MTS, as well as Mary Dover, Deputy Chief of Bus Operations with NCTD. So over the past year, SANDAG has conducted a transit fare change study on behalf of it, but MTS and NCTD provide input and are affected by any changes to the fares. So the study that we did was a collaborative effort between all 3 agencies. So I'll start with a slide that lists the steps that we take during a transit fare change study. First, I want to highlight that the public outreach arrow on the left side shows continuous engagement throughout the study. So actions at every step of the way are informing these scenarios to the boards of directors of MTS and NCTD, as well as the SANDAG Transportation Committee for discussion. Today is the 3rd presentation to the Transportation Committee that we've provided on the fare change study after October 2025 and March 2026. The 4th step is modeling and analysis. Any changes to fares, they might provide additional revenue, but this could also affect ridership. So using our survey data and model that we developed, we can estimate how much the fares and revenues are likely to be affected based on these proposed changes. Conduct Title VI analysis as required by the Federal Transit Administration and board policy to show how low-income and minority riders would be affected. We then bring these results to the MTS and NCT boards of directors so they can provide their input to SANDAG formally. Ultimately, SANDAG has the authority to amend the Comprehensive Fare Ordinance. Per Board Policy 1, this authority is delegated to the Transportation Committee. I'll now turn the floor over to Mark Olson, who will talk about how this fare change study was initiated. We'll then turn it over to Mary. So, Mark, go ahead.
All right, thanks, Tim, and thanks, members of the committee and chair. We appreciate this opportunity. We wanted to provide some context first as to why the MTS Board of Directors is recommending fare changes. It really comes down to a budget challenge that we're having. Revenues just haven't been keeping pace with expenses. As you can see on this chart, if you look at the red bar, that's recurring revenue, and if you look at the blue bar, that's expenses. In FY 2019, that was balanced out, and even many years before that, that was balanced out. But then once COVID hit, you can see in FY 20 and FY 21, we really saw a dip and as you can see in FY 22, we were still using some of the reserves, which is the green bar, that we received from the federal government and state government. And we almost, the gap continues to widen, and we're having to use more of our reserves in green there. And that's where we stand now. And the main reason that we've had to use more of those reserves is expenses have gone up significantly, particularly in the wage category. We've also seen sales tax performance not being too great, but then also federal and state subsidies are relatively flat. So our revenues that we're bringing in have been relatively flat while expenses continue to go up. So we've been able to bridge that gap using one-time emergency, really looking to see how we can extend this runway out to 20. To find a more long-term sustainable funding source for MTS, whether that's going out to voters and asking them for more funds, or whether that's finding more funds through state measures or through the federal government. But we're looking to extend that runway and buy us some more time. So in order to do that, we basically need to find about 5 financial sustainability strategy to go ahead and do that. There's a few different steps, and really fares are just one small piece to the pie, but they are an important piece. So this board approved strategy focuses on looking at new revenue opportunities through advertising and other means, but we're also deferring some service expansion commitments that were made. So all of this is really helping us out to extend this runway out to 2030. But the things that we have direct control over to help out of that process are the cost of ride and then service levels. Those are things that MTS has total control over. And that's one of the reasons that we're looking and leaning on this as part of our financial sustainability strategy. And going out to riders, and Tim will talk a little bit about the outreach that we did, but really it was clear, I think that, riders, were really, they understood that the costs were going up for MTS. They understood this was a challenge they're experiencing with their own household budgets, how much it costs to just the cost of their living. It's also the cost of doing business for MTS. So I think a lot of people I talked to were willing to be a part of the solution for MTS with this financial sustainability strategy. So that was really encouraging to hear. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Tim and Mary to go through the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Mark. So NCTD is in a similar position to MTS and is employing some of the same strategies that MTS has utilized. $1 deficit, with that growing to 19, 23, and 25 in FY 29, 30, and 31, respectively. So in some cases, NCTD is able to shift some capital resources and using some reserves to cover some capital costs. This is a short-term and sometimes seen as a one-time solution to solving a funding gap, and so it is not sustainable for those out years. Our reserves are also limited. NCTD staff is also working diligently to federalize as many expenses as possible to free up some of those state and local resources to cover operating expenses. NCTD has also begun the process to redevelop 11 of its rail stations, which will provide ground lease revenue. Although this solution does provide a long-term sustainable funding source, it's only anticipated to generate modest revenues to NCTD and will not cover the full funding gap. Staff has also taken a closer look at discretionary spending and has reduced reliance on outside contracts. NCTD was able to reduce our operating budget by $10 million by managing some consultant contracts. Where feasible, NCTD is completing work with in-house resources and shifting priorities to manage costs. As Mark mentioned, kind of those 2 final strategies that partners within the industry utilize include looking at service levels in comparison to fare prices. Our planning department has done some diligent work to assess existing routes and manage frequency expansions, as Mark mentioned, and we're looking at
trips, frequencies, spans of service, and able to identify some underperforming services that we could manage to free up some. In some cases, the board has authorized modifications to routes and services to better align with traveler patterns. Costs. So NCTD has taken a lot of the same measures that MTS has taken to manage our costs, and we're still unfortunately facing a funding gap. So the region came together in partnership with SANDAG to start this fare change study and try to raise some of those revenues through the fare prices to manage some of those service cuts. NCTD's board did vote to recommend that the Transportation Committee approve the fare change proposal as outlined in the fare ordinance in April, and I'll pass it back over to Tim to kind of go through more of the process.
All right, thank you, Mark and Mary, for that background. So we'll now get into the public outreach that we did throughout the study. So this really started about a year ago that we initiated the process and really started the public outreach in the fall, so about 9 months ago. So the way that SANDAG conducts public outreach when considering fare changes is prescribed in Board Policy 25 and 29, SANDAG. We followed all of the requirements, but also gone beyond to make sure that we've heard from as many transit riders as possible throughout the region. This slide shows the main phases of public outreach. Initial questions and discussions were more general because we wanted to hear from riders about their priorities for fare policies. And based on that feedback, we worked collaboratively SANDAG, MTS, and NCTD to develop potential fare change scenarios to get more feedback and reactions from riders and better understand what types of changes they would like to see and how they would assess different trade-offs. Based on that next set of feedback, MTS and NCTD developed proposed scenarios, brought them to their boards for consideration, and as Mark and Mary mentioned, both boards of directors voted to recommend that SANDAG approve the changes. We held 2 more public meetings earlier this week where we had additional opportunities to make formal public comments. And we concluded all of these comments received in the public outreach report, which is attachment 3 to the staff report for today's item. And I'll come back to this. But if approved by SANDAG, there will be additional outreach to riders to let them know about upcoming fare changes in advance of going in effect, which we would expect in October of this year. So we did public outreach in a variety of ways throughout the study. So we had a mix of in-person and online events, reaching as many people as we could, but also reaching people where they were in the system. So this included advertising in newspapers, social media, and media advisories that were picked up to help broadcast the availability of our events even more. In total, we received more than 7,000 responses to our different forms of outreach, so surveys. We also had more than 80 participants at 7 workshops, had held 24 pop-up events at 19 transit centers throughout the region, both in MTS and NCTD service areas, and then 2 public meetings earlier this week, as I mentioned. So this slide lists some of the main points that we heard over these last 9 months of talking to the public about these potential fare changes. First off, no one's really excited about fare changes, about paying more to ride transit. So we certainly heard some opposition and concern that raising fares would affect affordability and ridership, as some riders would either stop riding transit altogether or at least ride less if it costs more to ride. At the same time, and as Mark was mentioning, we used the public engagement opportunities to explain why we were in this situation, why fare changes were being considered. And we asked people to consider the trade-offs associated with the decision to make fare changes. We heard that most respondents would rather have higher fares if that meant that transit service levels could be maintained. That would mean less frequent service, fewer transit routes, or shorter spans of service, as the transit agencies would be expected to face budget challenges in coming years, as both Mark and Mary mentioned. We heard support for gradual fare increases instead of a single large change. We heard strong support for maintaining discounted senior disabled Medicare passes and fares, as well as the Youth Opportunity Pass, which provides free transit for youth 18 and under. And then finally, we heard preference for keeping the fare tagging system, which is a policy started a few years ago that allows for riders to pay as they go when using Pronto rather than having to buy a day pass or a monthly pass up front. We also conducted a review of peer agency fares from around the country to see how our fares, how they compare. So we have 2 parts of the table on this side. On the left, we have the bus and light rail side. and agencies that operate in U.S. metropolitan areas of similar population size, serving similar numbers of transit riders, and operating similar services, so effectively bus and light rail, similar like our trolley. The prices in the table are for the San Diego region, which for this comparison is referring to the fares charged on bus, trolley, and Sprinter. Have those passes, the fares $2.50 for a one-way, $6 for a day pass, and $72 for an adult monthly pass. We found that the one-way and the day passes are fairly similar to the peer agencies, but the price for the adult monthly pass on the table on the right, we have the NCTD coaster fare compared with other agencies that operate commuter rail. We found that the adult one-way and monthly passes with the coaster are generally lower compared to Metro at the same. And then a question about why wasn't LA Metro included on this list? For one thing, LA Metro is a much larger agency in a larger metro area. It operates additional services like heavy rail, so not directly comparable to our network system. But on top of that, LA Metro benefits from many more voter-approved sales taxes, and therefore less reliant on fare revenue to help support their operating functions. So here we have a summary of the proposed fare changes for the most common fare products that are used in our system. The proposal reflects feedback that we heard from the public, including a preference for a phased fare change. So the proposed changes are divided into two phases, $85 and then $95 in phase 2. And the SDM month pass will go from $23 to $28 in phase 1 and then $30 in phase 2. So as you can see, the SDM fare is in some cases about a 50% discount compared to the regular fare, but in other cases like the monthly pass, it's roughly a 2/3 discount off of the adult regular monthly fare. Currently, coaster riders have a slightly different system. They pay based on how far they travel, the number of zones that they're traveling through. So riding from downtown San Diego is more expensive than riding from Solana Beach to Oceanside. Most coaster customers already ride the maximum 3 zones, and this distance-based structure is unique to San Diego. So the fare structure to be simplified such that fares are not based on distance, regardless of distance travel. And there's another table on the right side of this slide that lists the anticipated effects if these proposed changes are approved. Phase 1, and then $15 million annually starting in phase 2. And then in phase 2, we estimate that there will be about 3 million fewer annual boardings, which is about 3% less than the total of this. So the comprehensive fare ordinance is the document that lists all of the details and the policies that accompany these fare charts, and is attachment 1 if you'd like to take a look. So the document includes all of the tables that kind of have all of these things in detail. It explains more about the 2-phase implementation. So about phase 1, once again, starting October 1st, 2026. Phase 2 starting more detail about the coaster zone elimination, which I mentioned. There's other details about policies. So for example, services are included. This is merely to be consistent with other pass types, and also noting that transit agencies can determine the expiration dates for these passes. When it comes to post-secondary institution and group passes, things like colleges and universities, it's proposed to simplify the formulas for calculating the price for these semester passes and monthly passes based on the regular adult monthly passes. Temporary promotional experimental fares. The change is, right now, those are allowed for 12 months to understand if the pilot is successful. So that's proposed to be extended to 36 months. But noting that the Title VI federal requirements would still be in effect for any fare program, in effect longer than 6 months. Promotional fares would be maintained for 12 months. There's a new section in the proposed fare ordinance for free and reduced fare programs. This would allow MTS and NCTD to establish free or heavily discounted passes for certain populations, subject to funding availability. This would include things such as low income riders. also have changes to eligibility for reduced fares in the proposed fare ordinance. This is state and federal laws and regulations. And then finally, microtransit services like NCTD Plus are proposed to be defined in the ordinance with a note that transit operators can establish their own policies, prices, and discounts for these types of services. At the same time, there are many things in the comprehensive fare ordinance that would be maintained. This includes fare cap system, free transfers, SDM fares, and the youth opportunity pass, discounted post-secondary institutions, and universal passes or U-passes. These would all be maintained if these proposed changes are approved. Low-income riders. We evaluated this for both the Phase 1 and the Phase 2 proposed changes and found that there would be no significant adverse effect on minorities or on low-income persons. More details on the attachment, or more details are available in the attachment 4 to the staff report. So to recap what we've done, we did public outreach, and throughout the study, we reviewed peer agency fares, we developed proposed fare changes, updated the comprehensive fare ordinance with an proposed amendment, and evaluated the anticipated effects of the proposed fare change. It requires a multi-step process, as Chair Zita was mentioning at the beginning of the item. So today is the introduction step. So this means that the Transportation Committee is asked to conduct the first reading of the proposed amendments to the comprehensive fare ordinance by reading the title and waiving the full recitation. Next month, on July 17th, the Transportation Committee will be asked to conduct the second reading and approve the ordinance amendments. Pending approval at that meeting and ratification by the Sandeck Board of Directors, the ordinance would take effect 30 days later. If approved, MTS and NCTD will communicate the date and details of the upcoming fare change, prepare the Pronto system and ticket vending machines to process the new fares, and then begin collecting Phase 1 fares starting October 1st, 2026. That concludes my presentation, and welcome any questions or feedback from the Transportation Committee. Back to you, Chair.
Thanks, Tim, and Mark and Mary. Very thorough presentation. Francesca, do we have any public comment?
Thank you, Chair. We do. If you're online and would like to speak on item 4, please raise your hand now. In the room, we have 4 public comments. We'll start with Cesar Javier and allegedly Audra.
We are at our twilight years. The concept of our survival were work, 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 work. And so, as gratitude from taxpayers, seniors, our twilight years, may we humbly recommend that we shall be free in our mobility, in our circulation in this great region. Is that valid, Councilor Rivera, our leadership in our community? A community that is economically disadvantaged, forgotten, unattended? I think our craving is only valid and logical. Sir Mario, we learn in our public administration that governance doesn't make business, doesn't profit, supposed to be, but rather spend that resource to zero. That's what we understood in our learning. You're collecting and investing, and so you get some profit and revenue, when in fact it should not be, but spend the money for public service adequately, timely, efficiently, and effectively. That's what we learned. We speak of the truth. We work for so many years, and now we request that we will be free, healthily, safely, benefiting on this great region, traveling and see the scenic and the most
Thank you. Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be
came to these, how you evaluated adverse effects and came to that there are none. When people are just trying to survive and you're talking about increasing fares, that is nonsense when you're saying back them. I find I'm calling bullshit. Because it's like, you guys are sitting here $500 million over the next 4 years. If you increase these fares, that's not gonna even come close to what you guys need. People work extremely hard. They shed their blood, sweat, and tears to fund your racketeering. It's not that there's a lack of money. It's that there is negligence happening with the money that is given to people like you that are trusted to be good stewards of it. And you're not, and you constantly come after the people for more money. And again, I'm gonna say this because it's like, so relevant. That's what you guys do. You haven't, I mean, sure, maybe with your taxes, but it's like, you guys sit here and you take our money, you mismanage it, and then you continually come back time and time and time again to the people that are out there just struggling to survive for more money, saying that like, oh, it's the cost of living versus the cost of MTS. Well, fuck MTS. You guys can't even provide good transit that allows us to get everywhere. I mean, New York can do it. You don't even want to drive there. It's actually like you don't want to more money.
Our next speaker will be Jesse Ramirez, followed by Maria Cortez.
Good afternoon. And we're also a transportation opposition to these very changes for various reasons. First of all, I think there was a lack of meaningful engagement. I don't think it's real engagement to ask folks to pick between fare hikes and service cuts. Also, too, even with this fare increase, MTS is not really addressing a structural deficit. They're still going to have a deficit. And then we will also be hurting our ridership core. If we're serious about having public transportation as an option, we kind of need to make sure it's accessible. And last but not least, I think folks in general in San Diego are tired about hearing from fees from local government. I think folks want to see our government take action and fund things. So I urge this committee to prioritize public transportation as a real option to get around and to go back to the drawing board and seek funding that will not pin this on working San Diego.
I just want to say that I live there. I see what's going on. You're going to have ridership decrease drastically. And the survey that you guys sent out, the people were confused. They said that you need to be more explanatory with the survey that was taken. And like I said, you're going to see from the community, but other communities are going to pay their rent. They take a second look and redo this again, because we are out there in the community. We know what's going on. Yes, but really, come to the community and you will see what it's about. Our council member here, he knows what we're about. And I'm proud to say.
You can go ahead.
It is truly unfortunate that we have reached a point where fare increases are being considered, but Circulate has closely followed MTS's budget to support the proposed fare amendments, because maintaining service must remain the region's top transit priority. On the cycle known as the transit doom loop. Preserving frequent, reliable service is the best way to maintain ridership. Riders depend on reliable buses and trolleys, and they understand that service quality matters. While fare increases are goals. For these reasons, Circulate supports the proposed fare amendments and urges your approval. Thank you.
Followed by Mid-City Can.
Hi. The City of Oakland budget meeting going on in front of right away the City of San Diego, and you agreed things. A lot was explained to vote for the item in July, but hold off on the fair issues and have a more deliberation into the fall. To remind yourselves of that. To remind yourselves that there can be many ways to get funding for calendar agendas. I think could be a help fund MTS programs, all gap measures through the fall to work on the fair freeze issue. That's really important, I think. And if that fair incremental approach instead of a really steep increase you're offering this fall. It's way too steep, and I hope you really at least the fair freeze is even better. And good luck in how you can do that. And it's really important that it's just an open conversation. It's like I've been describing the past month. How to have that conversation and make the space for that. Good luck how to do that in the following weeks. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our final.
Hello, board members. My name is Guadalupe Rojas, and I'm a policy advocate with Mid-City Can and City Heights, which is very transit dependent and low income, and many of our residents, as Maria mentioned, actually oppose the fare increase. Out of all the transit-related topics that I've had to work with them on, this has been the most difficult one because stories of my community members who are struggling in many different ways, and a $3.25 fare will definitely be a burden. For rent, and even then, they can't afford a monthly pass at its current cost. One-way. The community workshop MTS hosted at City Heights. People like myself can pay the new fare, but there's a lot of riders that we work with who cannot. That is why other organizers and myself have asked for other alternatives like charging insurance more or surge pricing, but we have moved away from these ideas since we were told it's too difficult to implement. That is why we asked that for very low income riders, seniors, and disabled folks to continue paying the current fares once the new fares do go into effect. I got to hear how a disabled folk asked that she would have to pay once this.
Thank you. That concludes the public comments on this item.
Thank you, Francesca, and thank you for all the deal with the need for a vote to waive the full reading or the full recitation of the ordinance. That will require unanimous vote. We're going to do that. Mayor Sanchez.
So moved.
A motion and a second. Ordinance establishing a regional fare pricing schedule. After this, we can discuss the merits of the ordinance, and if there's any other desired changes, go ahead, please vote on the motion.
Chair, can I just mention exactly the commitment of staff after this for us to be building that pathway parallel to this?
So with that, let's go into discussion. And Sean, why don't you talk about what you're hoping to achieve?
Thank you.
Can I ask a point of order? This is more procedural. Meeting of that come up before that somebody that we ended up reading the entire ordinance, just for a vote. So I just thought that this was more procedural.
Yeah, well, the motion passed, so I think we're good, but thanks. We can talk about that further for future potential initiatives of that, but let's talk about the ordinance itself.
Thank you.
And I know the Vice Chair has some real meaningful comments to make.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I understand it's a procedural step, and just I have a responsibility to fight for my constituents. And one of the ways that I typically do that is by using all the procedural levers that I have to fight for my constituents. Related to an action that we took yesterday at the MTS Board of Directors to riders from proposed fare increases. On conversation at MTS about the potential impacts of fare increases on vulnerable riders. At no point in time have we questioned the validity of the structural deficit, questioned the prevalence of transit agencies dealing with structural deficits across the country, or question the need for additional revenue in order to avoid that. That's all of that happened, and I was opposed to the fare increase because I did not feel like we had done everything that could be done to shield the most vulnerable folks in San Diego from the impacts of that increase. So yesterday at MTS, we approved a fare freeze holding current fares for riders enrolled in CalFresh, Medi-Cal, or CalWorks. These are working families whose incomes have already been verified by the county, who aren't covered by any existing discount, and have no more to give in terms of money to anyone, and are in the midst of seeing those benefits that they rely on. Is when this comes back in July, provide us with an update on regional implementation of low-income fare protection under Section 9.2.3 of the ordinance, which includes options for, and in that include options for coordinating eligibility, enrollment, and funding for an MTS fare freeze program. So I'll turn to staff. Is that something that can happen as an informational update in July? And I'm not asking for a super comprehensive report. Basically, here's what I'm asking for. I'm asking for Sandag to talk to MTS, and when this comes forward in July, for us to hear how MTS is building this fare freeze program, because my support for a fare freeze is contingent upon, my support for a fare increase is contingent upon the fare freeze program being created.
Well, I'm going to start and then I'll let. I think, this is like adding program. I think I'm going to go in a sequence progression here. The ordinance, I think we added language to allow discount. Can we talk to our partner agencies? Of course we can talk to, but can we come up with a program in July?
I'm not asking for.
We can come out with some ideas.
Yeah.
And based on a discussion, right? I don't know the limitations, the work that it would take each of the agencies. We can get together and discuss ideas. I don't know if Antoinette or Sharon or Sean would have any comments about that, but that we could get together. We talk about a lot of things together. Coming up, and you already said you're not looking for something that's fully baked. That.
Yeah, I think you covered it, Mario. If having a conversation, discussing some options, yes, but it's something we would have to do a thoughtful analysis on, because administering a program like that, creating it is one thing, but then administering it, there needs to be a lot of analysis done on what the cost is, how that would be staffed.
Yeah, here's what I said at MTS. We're moving toward approving a budget that doesn't include the fare increase, because I'm just going to speak for myself. I am not comfortable increasing fares until I know the people who are most likely to be negatively impacted by that fare increase are protected from that fare increase. Similarly, I am not going to vote to approve a fare increase until I am confident that we're doing the work to build the program to protect those folks from that increase. So I don't need a fully baked program. I do need to know that we're moving toward that program being built before the mom with two and who's barely keeping a roof over her head and food on her kid's plate is asked to pay more for the transportation she needs to get to those two jobs. If it can be done,
Can I appreciate the comments, Vice Chair, very much so. I'm a little confused still about what could create such a program with the language as it is inside of the ordinance. Is that a reason?
I think we need to let MTS speak to that.
Yeah, MTS staff has direction that we are going to have this program, so it will be happening.
Right, so it sounds like the language of the ordinance doesn't need to be changed in order to make this program work. So then, I guess Vice Chair, I'll go back to you. What are you hoping to get out of staff in order to make such a program
to know
work?
that we're on a parallel path for that program being built and ready by the time the fare increases go.
You have to
It's happening. If I don't know that, then I can't, in good conscience, vote yes on the fare increase because the folks who I'm trying to protect won't have to guarantee the protection.
And I understand that. I'm just trying to figure out what we need from Sandag staff in order for that to happen. Is staff clear on that? Because I'm not.
Well, I understand you requested an informational item, and Chair Zito, you control the agenda, so if you'd like an informational item on this topic, then you can request that it be added to the agenda.
Just for clarity, it doesn't even need to be a separate item. It can be bake it into the presentation. I'm not trying to upend what's already a busy agenda for next month. Totally understood. Just trying to create a path to get to yes, which is what we did at MTS yesterday.
It's going to be a program that MTS is going to propose, and we can get together and talk about it. But to my knowledge, you guys are already have direction on pursuing it.
Yes, we will be creating one in time for the October rollout of the new fare system.
Is it fair to meet, I guess from the perspective of to meet the objective of the Vice Chair, for us to get an update at the next meeting on what that might look like, or is that going to...
It's going to take, whether July is reasonable, but we are working.
Do you know if you're going to need something from Sandag staff in order to accomplish this?
Well, we always are looking for money.
Well, yes.
But other than that, no, we should be fine.
But I think, as part of this whole study, we had our chief economist become a fare elasticity modeler to understand what effects increases and decreases have. We did the fare discount study a couple years ago, looking at various ways we could maybe decrease fares as part of the regional plan. So we have some of the tools to help with the data, we have the demographics, so we would continue to work with staff like we did over the last year to help provide some of the data. That's essentially what we've been doing as part of this whole process is providing different sorts of data to them to help. So I think that's definitely something we would commit to over the next month and continue to work on that. Naomi, our economist, can help potentially model something. I know it's not easy to do what effects, because that's the big question, and I think you guys talked about yesterday at the board meeting is how much would something like this cost, right? So that's going to be the big part, working with you guys, trying to figure for those different programs that you had mentioned, and then kind of what that would cost, and we would help with the demographics, the survey data that we have, things like that. But again, it's
fair to say that work can get started, and then we can. That's what I'm saying. And then when we have our next meeting, I can work with the Vice Chair and staff to understand what might make sense to discuss or present, if possible, at that next meeting. Just an update of the work that's going on so far. Is that fair? Or
I think that's fair according to what.
Okay.
Yeah,
and we'll see what it comes out.
For sure.
That's
Yeah. And again, I no expectation for the program to be fully baked, and I'm not very unreasonable. And what we're trying to avoid is a situation that fare increase has been approved, fare increase is rolling out, and the program to protect folks from that is just in the very beginning stages of being thought through. And at that point, that will be on me for not can do more to protect folks from that increase.
Appreciate the comments. Does anybody else have, Mayor Sanchez?
There was another meeting before this that we.
About the MTS board meeting.
Right, okay.
You're invited to
But
that.
what is noticed for today is a fare increase, and the recommendation is to approve, and that's a recommendation that is being provided by NCTD and MTS.
Yeah,
It
but we
sounds
don't
like
need to
something that
approve
is.
today. This is just the first reading.
Right, the first reading. It's basically the introduction. Okay, and this has been going on for a few, couple of years, study. And it sounds like there's some, because I wasn't present at this meeting, and nor did I physically or by Zoom or anything. Which has not much of a connection to what we're doing today in terms of the noticed hearing. So I understand that it's a very difficult thing to do when you don't have the funds. Externally, what we're seeing kind of a parallel thing is higher gas costs for folks of families going to work, and they're not being subsidized. So I'd like to go ahead and make the motion that we move staff's recommendation.
So Mayor Sanchez, we don't need a motion. That was the point I was trying to make earlier.
Oh.
So the motion will occur next time at the next meeting. The only way we
continued.
Well, this is just the introduction, and I read the title, and we waived the reading of the ordinance, so we're done with that. We would need a motion if we want to make a change to the ordinance, or if we want to do a motion to direct staff to do something else.
All right, because at the city level, we do.
I understand.
Vote on
That's, I had the same impression, but I got clarification at the beginning of the meeting that we don't need a motion to just move forward at this point. That'll occur at the next meeting.
Okay, but so far, what I'm understanding is what we're introducing is what was being recommended.
Yes.
Pursuant to the documents that we were provided and was noticed.
Correct. That's what was. Any other comments? Mayor, not Mayor.
I do have a question. Okay. I had understood that whatever this is more of, because this is being done together because this impacts the entire county and together. So a basic question is if that hasn't been brought up by NCTD. So if there were to be a change that would be proposed at the next meeting, would that have to be applied evenly to NCTD as well?
So my understanding, again, what was being discussed. Yeah, we can, but I'm just saying what was being discussed was specific to MTS, but we can go and let staff answer that.
So one of the changes being proposed to the fare ordinance allows either of the operators to create discount programs. And so MTS and NCTD don't have to create the same discount program. Or yes, don't have to create one at all.
And when you say change, that's in the existing language, correct? Yes.
So that means.
So if the ordinance is not approved, you can't create this discount program. You need to approve the ordinance in order to create the discount program.
North County to San Diego, there could be two different fares. Okay. All right, thank you.
Councilmember Edson, or did somebody else have their hand up first? Or yeah, go ahead. One of you two speak.
I just want to make sure that we're not confused about anything here. In May, the MTS board voted to recommend the fare increase to the Transportation Committee. But then at our before that, I'm sorry I don't have all these dates, we discussed our budget for next year, and our budget included the proposed fare increase. And a few of the MTS members were, we didn't approve the budget. We voted, but did not approve the budget because it included the fare, the proposed fare increase. So we had a workshop yesterday, and the direction to staff at that workshop was to take and the majority of the board members also voted to include an additional discount program for the class of people, low income people who are in Medi-Cal. I think it was Medi-Cal, CalWorks, and one other program. And so that really doesn't affect. That's something that we need to work on within our MTS board. So we need to. You need to keep your MTS hat on, but I need to take mine off as a member of this committee. So I don't know if that clears, if that makes anything clearer or not.
Well, definitely, yeah, it helps outline the timeline of how we got here
and why we're bringing this up.
Yeah, and why it's being brought up. Yeah, I appreciate that. Councilmember Edson.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer, for that explanation, because the last thing I read before I went to sleep last night was the MTS letter. Ordinance. This fare change ordinance. Okay, so you do still support the fare change ordinance?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. So I have some comments on behalf of NCTD and what our board has been through. So fare revenue represents approximately 7% of NCTD's operating budget, which is about $12.5 million annually. It is key to transit operations, since these precious flexible dollars can be used to cover recurring operations costs such as labor, fuel, and maintenance, which few other colors of money allow. On April 16th, following a frank, lengthy, and robust discussion, it went on for hours. There was a lot of speaking that went on. During the first year, the proposed fare ordinance is anticipated to increase NCTD's fare revenue by approximately $650,000. And in the second year, due to the recommended phased fare increases, to raise revenue by more than $1.2 million. We all know about that gap in that fiscal cliff. With today's dry climate around state and federal dollars is critical to balancing ever-increasing operations costs, much as we heard from Mark and Marion, and to helping NCTD address the future operating budget challenges or fiscal cliff fiscal year. There is never a good time to raise fares. I mean, everyone in this room, I think, can agree to that. However, presented with a choice, the lion's share of transit riders surveyed, at least surveyed by NCTD, expressed support for incremental fare increases over the reduction of service levels. The cost of NCTD's monthly passes has not increased since 2009. That's 17 years. I wasn't on the board then, but I was on the board of both NCTD and SANDAG in 2019 when an adjustment to the fare ordinance was contemplated, but not pursued due to the advent of COVID-19 pandemic. Because there is never a good time to raise fares, while NCTD's board unanimously recommended the fare changes before us today, the board also strongly recommended that in the near future, SANDAG study reduced fare options for the benefit of extremely low-income riders. And I think that what we're all hearing and what we all understand, that the unfortunate reality at this time is that it's a choice, at least for, I know, NCTD and I believe MTS as well, between cutting service and raising fares. And again, going back to good choice, right? But their choice seems to be to raise fares incrementally. So.
Any other comments or inputs? Yes, go ahead, Rafael.
I just want to share, I appreciate the efforts that have gone into getting the fare process to this point, and also appreciate Vice Chair really looking out for the most vulnerable communities. But I think one thing that is just evident, and I may be stating the obvious, but I think it falls upon all of us to lean on our state and federal delegations to seek the funding needed to fill these gaps. Because it's not just a structural gap, there's a gap in our aspirational goals too, the things we want to accomplish going down. So I just think it's just a reminder of transportation needs we have as a region. And those are my comments. Thanks.
Appreciate that. Good thoughts. Any other comments? Seeing nobody else, thank you, guys. Challenging discussion, as always, but I appreciate the thorough job on the report.
Chair, could I ask a question of staff?
I just moved on. No, just kidding. Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Rice.
So I really appreciated Rafael's comments, and I think it would be great if we could lean on our federal. The unfortunate reality, as I understand it, is that most of the dollars that come cannot be used the way we need to use them for operations, and that's the change that we need at the state and federal level, is for them to free up some, make those dollars more fungible, more flexible, so that we can use them in other ways. It's great to get a new bus, but if you don't have any money to pay the drivers for the bus, it's not helpful. Thanks.
Okay. Anybody else?
Just one last thing.
Sure, go ahead, John.
Chair, sorry. I'm trying to wear that hat. In the materials, there was a reference to the NCTD board, including a letter to Sandag, advocating for Sandag to study creating a low fare discount program. And so the intent here was actually that as a region, as we discuss this next month, we have a more comprehensive understanding of the direction that the region is moving to create those low-income programs. And so I just wanted to give that additional context that I wasn't trying to throw a curveball out just from MTS. I tracked that letter that NCTD had created and sent to Sandag, and the action was more explicit on the MTS side, but NCTD was trying to head as well. And so I just want to put that out there as well. This is much more in the spirit of trying to have the region move in a direction to protect vulnerable riders than it is a one-off MTS action, or just like, my personal policy goal in this meeting.
If I could respond.
Sure.
So at the NCTD board, we all have this desire, but we also recognize that it would take some heavy lifting to come up with what that program might look like, and to establish what very, very low income. And the board pretty much settled on the fact that we weren't looking at maybe a standard low income, but something that's really, really the people that cannot pay that extra quarter for the fare increase. So again, we need a lot of staff input, and I'm just not sure that can happen by July, and that's why we didn't put a
increase. And I think that's what you're going to see next month is whatever numbers were on that board to try to help resolve some of these issues would be wiped away and or in the negative in the event that we would have a comprehensive low-income plan that hit certain income levels. And that's why I think our board wanted to keep it, I don't remember what the exact number was, but we looked at it from, I think, anywhere ranging from $15,000 a year to $25,000 a year, and what those income levels would have an impact on the current setting. Years in public transportation, fares covered anywhere between 15 and 25. And I think we collectively as a community have prioritized the impact that CPI has had on livability in San Diego County and directly correlated that to the cost of public transportation. And now we don't have a fillback for our agencies to be able to manage service on the street without a fare increase. Going from what I think NCTD was at some point in time, 17.5 or 15% of our budget was covered by fares to 7%. It's a pretty steep drop when we continue to see anywhere between 3 and 5% CPI increases for labor and other operational aspects of both of our organizations. I don't think it's lost on us that there's certainly a need to look at those things. Inherently has had a low cost in relation to others, and I can only speak to other states that I've worked in. This is one of the lowest fares in the nation for a metropolitan area our size. And when you look at the monthly passes, they're still probably somewhere between $15 and $20 off what other metropolitan areas of our size are, combined with the difficulty with CPI. And so it's not an easy conversation, and I definitely appreciate the comments by the community. How can we solve that problem? And I think that's not necessarily a conversation we would have internally. We want to have that conversation with our partners in Sandag, and there's an opportunity to have some continuity, I think, between the systems. We would like to do that, but and what that looked like at each of those levels to manage what that would do to the budget in a fair increase sort of situation. Thanks for the clarity, Mario. You want to add something?
Yeah, probably same thing that Sean has said, but in a little bit different way. And look, the willingness of the three boards to help the most vulnerable has been there. I really urge you guys to see the success of the Youth Opportunity Pass. That hasn't been easy funding it, but it's been a partnership. We're in the midst of partnering even on redirecting capital funds to try to help some of our partners in the different colors of money. So, the letters were there, the requests were there. We're gonna work. Personally, I don't need to give a commitment, but I can give it to, that's our job. And to take care of the needs of the region, and we're trying to do it the best way that we can. We follow law, we follow the requests from our partners. So yeah, we're there. We're gonna model whatever we can by July, but this is going to be an ongoing process, because setting a major discount program, it is going to require probably the same or very close level of engagement with the public as the fare ordinance engagement, as well as an analysis. So you have our commitment that we're going to be looking and working into this. Not that because it's being asked at this meeting, it's part of our job, and we'll go to it.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to, because I think there's a little bit of confusion about what we actually took action on at MTS and what I'm asking for. It's not a discount program. It's a freeze for low-income people who meet particular objective standards, enrollment in existing programs. I'm sure that a model could be built where that would lead to an overall decrease in revenue, but that would be the scenario under which that would take place would be pretty remarkable, because everyone's paying at least what they're paying now in what we put forward yesterday at MTS. So they're going to ride it no matter what, but our model showed that there would be some decrease in ridership. So it's meant to be the most financially responsible way to create the protections that we desire. It's not a discount program, it's a freeze, and that is a very important distinction from a revenue perspective and from a long-term transit agency financial viability perspective as well. I just want to make sure that part was clear, because I'm starting to hear what we did expand into something that it's not. It was pretty targeted, quite specific, and there's cost controls built into that because of that.
Yeah, thanks, Vice Chair. I would just say weird things can happen when you start playing with numbers and models. We'll just have to see how the model plays out and try to understand the analysis. Mayor Sanchez.
Thank you. This is a unique way that has been set up with respect to the Transportation Committee being the one that approves versus the board. I think that came up once upon a time recently with respect to that. We are short of funds regionally on several projects and MTS. I'm not hearing that staff is going to somehow come up with some kind of a subsidized program. This is going to be within whatever each of these transit agencies budget, whatever it is, that somehow, I know we, within the board itself, in moving forward, projects through phases, like the managed lanes, skip. So I'm assuming this is still going to be decided versus going to the board. Would that be correct?
So per board policy, this is delegated, the fare ordinance is delegated to the Transportation Committee. However, the board ratifies the decisions that the Transportation Committee makes.
Okay.
And just to give some more color to that, the board, once it goes to them for ratification, can't make changes. All they can do is give a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Okay.
If they give a thumbs down, we go back to square one.
Okay, because as I said, this is the one time it seems like that the Transportation Committee makes a quasi final approval.
There are live within the Transportation Committee, certain RTIP amendments live within TC. They all go to the board for ratification. Everything that this...
Okay, but in terms of like any suggestions that funding come from outside these sources, that wouldn't be something that could be discussed at the SANDAG board?
So we're simply talking about approval of the fare ordinance. If you're talking about funding and new programs, that is something that would go to the board of directors. The Transportation Committee would talk about it, would make some recommendations, and then the board would hear it.
Okay, I'll try again. Any last comments? Otherwise, it looks like we can move on to, thank you. I appreciate all of the good input. We'll move on to item number 5, update to the Metropolitan Transit System Fiscal Year 25 Transit Extension Ordinance Funding Eligibility Request.
Good afternoon. Today we are returning to the Transportation Committee with an item previously presented on April 17th related to Transnet funding eligibility. Since April, SANDAG staff and auditors have been working with MTS to address the funding eligibility requirements in the Transnet ordinance. As As part of the annual ITALC audits, operator eligibility is reviewed, and there were preliminary findings of noncompliance identified in the draft report. The findings are based on the fiscal year 2025 operating cost increases for MTS and NCTD, exceeding the change in the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. The audit evaluates compliance with Section 4C5 of the Transnet Ordinance, which requires that year-over-year increase in operating costs per revenue vehicle hour for bus and the transit findings to be resolved prior to issuance of the final audit report through board approval of the transit operator's request for an exception. The Transit Ordinance provides that in the event of unusual circumstances or events beyond an operator's control, an operator may request commission approval to calculate the requirement using two alternative methods: use CPI growth averaged over the previous 3 years, or exclude from the calculation certain cost increases that were due to external events entirely beyond the operator's control.
How we got here. The annual audit report and request for exceptions to the funding eligibility requirement was presented to the ITALC committee on April 8th. The result of the committee's discussion was to pass a resolution recommending that the board of directors not approve these requests. The ITALC expressed concern about operator eligibility being a regular annual occurrence. The committee noted that these instances do not reflect excessive operator spending, but rather the need to review the standard against which costs are being measured that's within the ordinance. The ITALC supports amending the ordinance to provide a more realistic method for evaluating operating cost increases, as many cost drivers have become. We summarized previous discussions that have occurred around amending the Transnet Ordinance, but no formal actions have been taken. The ITALC would like the board of directors to move forward with potential amendments to this section of the Transnet Ordinance. To address concerns from the ITALC, last time this committee met on April 7th, or when we discussed this previously on April 17th, this committee requested the board begin discussions to amend the operator eligibility section of the Transnet Ordinance. At that same meeting, a concern with MTS's eligibility request was brought before the Transportation Committee. Due to a proposed change in methodology that was not contemplated within the ordinance language, the recommendation to this committee was to not to the board. Since April, we've been working with MTS to that is allowed within the Transnet Ordinance. The revised MTS letter is included in the agenda packet as attachment 2 and describes how operating cost growth for both bus and rail can be adjusted to less than the CPI growth by excluding increased costs due to external events. MTS has changed the rail calculation to be based on revenue vehicle miles consistent with the Transnet Ordinance. The bus service component has not changed. The revised rail calculation has been reviewed by Sandex staff, legal, and our external auditors. The revised request is in compliance with the ordinance, and if approved by the board, MTS will be in compliance with the Transnet funding eligibility requirements. We do want to once again cover what happens if the request is not approved. There are two immediate impacts to the Transnet operator if the board does not approve the request for an exception to the eligibility requirement. The first is that MTS would be left with an uncleared audit finding for fiscal year 25. The second is that the ordinance limits the amount of funding the transit operator can receive in the next fiscal year, which is 26. Received in 26 to the previous fiscal year plus the CPI of 3.71%. This doesn't have a financial impact for Transnet for fiscal year 26 is actually less than the 3.71%. It's expected to grow at 2.63%. While the ordinance has separate eligibility calculations for bus and rail, the Transnet funding allocation applies to the agency as a whole, and it's not broken out between bus and rail. If bus is approved and rail is not, for example, the full funding allocation to MTS would be limited. This is why we brought back both bus and rail to be considered at the same time for MTS. So overall, We received a revised letter from MTS on May 28th. We are discussing it today at TC, brought it back to you for your consideration, and then we'll bring it to the board on June 26th for their consideration with whatever decision is made by this committee. After the board has reviewed it, we will convey their action to the auditor so they can. With that, we'd like to just make sure everyone's clear on the recommendation before you, which is to consider the transit funding eligibility request for Metropolitan Transit System. Recommend the Board of Directors acting as the Transportation Committee approve the updated request. And we have representatives from MTS available should you have any questions for them. And I'll turn it back to the chair.
Thank you. Appreciate the report. Francesca, do we have any public speakers?
If you are on Zoom and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand now. We have 2 speakers in the room. We'll start with Cesar Javier and then allegedly Audra.
Looks like we are alerted on the sphere of flexibility, transparency, if only to direct our vision to a more efficient and effective process. This is a challenge for all of us, particularly on our side, to learn. And so we could also do some calculations, honest, humble contribution, if only to solve this issue of financial sustenance to our program. It's a conceptual presentation to you because of so many data that we wanted to grapple. First, what is the financial contribution of the city, for example, to the service provider, Sundag? How much of their money dedicated to a common program on mobility and circulation? They have. And you are the service provider to standardize these highways and all this circulation.
Thank you very much. Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be
By
allegedly
standard.
Audra.
Thank you, Standard.
Allegedly Audra will be our last speaker on this item.
There is a significant legal issue happening right now with conflicts of interest, with MTS and NCTD being present for Sean ordinance. It is illegal for you to participate because you're on both boards. It's a conflict of interest, and anybody with NCTD, you're not able to, under government section code 1090, you cannot participate in the ordinance or any of this funding. So the fact that you are, and you've done it because nobody's been holding you accountable, but I can't believe I'm the only one that would know that this is a conflict of interest as soon as it got presented. So we have a legal team that is not doing what they should be by making sure that you guys are following the law. Again, it's like you've already not noticed these meetings, so everything you've done is null and void. But this ordinance that you were just seeing is null and void. The funding that you're trying to get, you cannot do that. So I suggest that you course correct right now, because do we really want to go down this path of holding you guys accountable? I mean, this is how you take the government down, because they can't even follow the law. It's like, screw what you're doing. I mean, I can null and void it because you're not able to do what you should be. I mean, let's fucking go. If you want to fuck around and find out, keep going.
know it, Sean.
Anybody have questions or comments on the item? Otherwise,
Let's
entertain a
pass
motion
it, right?
to approve.
Make a motion to move staff's recommendation.
That motion passes unanimously with those members present, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. That kind of brings us to the end of the agenda. Next transportation meeting is scheduled for Friday, July 17th, back at 9.
May be adjourned, but they voted on this, so you know, all I need to do now is one by one pluck them off, because it's like you can't even follow the law. You know that you can't vote on an ordinance on a board that you're on somewhere else, or to try and get funding for that. And prior, they would sit there and folks that have been put up around us where they continue to racketeer. So God bless everyone.